The tears streaming down Olivia Baker's plump cheeks glistened in the dusty sunlight as she clutched the crumpled letter to her chest, her world shattering with each painful word penned by her former fiancé, who had abandoned her for a more suitable bride. The year was 1875, and in the frontier town of Whispering Creek, Colorado, a woman's worth was measured by her ability to attract a husband, something the townsfolk had decided Olivia could not accomplish due to her fuller figure. "You'll see, Mama," Olivia whispered to the empty room of her family's modest home. "I don't need a man to make my way in this world." She squared her shoulders and wiped away her tears, though the ache in her heart persisted like a dull knife. At 22, Olivia had endured more than her fair share of heartbreak. 3 courtships had ended in humiliation, each suitor eventually succumbing to the town's whispers that she was too plump for marriage. The latest rejection from Thomas Holloway had been the cruelest, coming just 2 weeks before their planned wedding. The next morning, Olivia rose with the sun, her determination as bright as the golden rays streaming through her window. She dressed in her most practical skirt and blouse, the fabric straining slightly at her curves. Her honey-colored hair was swept into a practical bun, a few tendrils escaping to frame her round face. Despite the whispers and stares that followed her through town, Olivia held her head high as she made her way to the general store. "Good morning, Mr. Patterson," she greeted the elderly shopkeeper with forced cheerfulness. "I'd like to inquire about that position you advertised." The balding man looked up from his ledger, surprise evident in his watery blue eyes. "The shopkeeper's assistant, but Miss Baker, that requires long hours on your feet. Surely a woman of your constitution would find it taxing." Olivia bit her tongue to keep from lashing out. "I'm stronger than I look, Mr. Patterson, and I need the work." After a moment's hesitation, the old man shook his head. "I'm sorry, but I've already promised the position to Lily Morgan. Perhaps Mrs. Henderson needs help with laundry." The suggestion that she was only fit for the most physically demanding and least desirable work stung worse than an outright rejection. Olivia thanked him stiffly and continued her search throughout the day, facing similar reactions at every establishment. By sunset, her feet ached and her spirit had begun to waver. As she passed the town's newspaper office, a notice in the window caught her eye. "Teacher needed, Pine Ridge Settlement 20 miles west." Olivia paused, considering. She had completed schooling in Denver before returning to Whispering Creek and had always loved books and learning. Perhaps this was the fresh start she needed, away from the gossip and judgment of people who had known her all her life. With renewed purpose, she pushed open the door to speak with the editor, William Thornton. "Pine Ridge, you say?" the bespectacled man remarked when she inquired. "It's a rough place, Miss Baker. Mostly ranchers and miners. They've had trouble keeping a teacher. The last 3 left within months." "Why is that?" Olivia asked, suddenly wary. "Isolation, harsh conditions," he hesitated. "And the local ranchers can be difficult, especially Wade McAllister. His land surrounds the settlement, and he's not fond of change or outsiders." Despite his warnings, Olivia left with the details of the position clutched in her hand. That night, as she explained her plans to her widowed mother, she felt a spark of excitement for the first time in months. "Are you certain, Olivia?" her mother asked, worry lining her gentle face. "It's so far, and you would be all alone." "I'm already alone here, Mama," Olivia replied softly. "At least there, no one knows me. I can be judged by my abilities rather than my appearance." 2 days later, Olivia boarded the stagecoach bound for Pine Ridge, her heart pounding with both fear and anticipation. The journey was grueling, the coach bouncing over rutted trails that barely qualified as roads. Her traveling companions, a silver-haired missionary and a sharp-eyed cattle buyer, made polite conversation but seemed lost in their own thoughts. As the coach crested a hill late in the afternoon, the driver called back, "Pine Ridge ahead." Olivia peered through the window at what would be her new home. The settlement was smaller than she had imagined, a cluster of wooden buildings straddling a dusty main street, surrounded by sweeping grasslands and distant pine-covered ridges. "Not much to look at," the cattle buyer remarked. "But the land around here is some of the finest grazing in Colorado." That's why McAllister fights so hard to keep it. The coach rolled to a stop outside a building marked General Store and Post Office. As Olivia descended awkwardly from the high step, she felt the curious stares of several men lounging on the porch. One spat tobacco juice into the dirt. "You the new schoolmarm," he called out. Olivia straightened her travel-wrinkled skirt. "Yes, I'm Miss Baker." The men exchanged glances, and she saw the familiar flicker of assessment in their eyes. Before any could comment, the store door swung open, and a stout woman with iron-gray hair emerged. "Miss Baker, I'm Martha Holbrook, chair of our school committee. We've been expecting you." She shot a quelling look at the men before ushering Olivia inside. "Don't mind them. Half the men in this town have forgotten their manners, if they ever had any." The store's interior was cool and dim after the bright sunshine. Martha Holbrook guided Olivia to a small table in the corner where a pot of tea waited. "The schoolhouse is just down the street," Martha explained as she poured. "There's living quarters in the back, basic but clean. We have 12 children enrolled, ages 6 to 14. "Can you handle such a range?" "I believe so," Olivia replied, sipping the strong tea gratefully. "I've prepared lessons for multiple levels." "Good. Classes start Monday morning. That gives you 3 days to settle in." Martha hesitated. "I should warn you, Miss Baker. Some folks here aren't convinced we need a proper school. They think reading and figures are enough, especially for girls." "Education benefits everyone," Olivia said firmly. "I intend to prove that." Martha's weathered face broke into a smile. "I believe you might. Now, let's get you settled before dark." The schoolhouse was a simple clapboard building with large windows and a small bell tower. Inside, rows of rough-hewn benches faced a teacher's desk and blackboard. The living quarters consisted of a bedroom, a small sitting room with a cast-iron stove, and a lean-to kitchen. Plain but functional, just as Martha had described. "The outhouse is out back," Martha explained, "and there's a well for water. The children take turns bringing firewood. Most families will pay in goods rather than cash eggs, meat, vegetables. It's not an easy life, but it's honest." After Martha left, Olivia unpacked her belongings, clothes, books, and a few cherished mementos. As she arranged her mother's embroidered pillowcase on the narrow bed, she heard the thundering approach of horses. Curious, she went to the window. A group of riders was passing through town, led by a man on a powerful black stallion. Even from a distance, she could see he commanded respect. The men lounging outside the store straightened as he approached, nodding in deference. The rider reined in his horse and swung down from the saddle with fluid grace. He was tall and broad-shouldered, his face shadowed by a wide-brimmed hat. As he strode toward the store, Olivia caught a glimpse of his profile, strong jaw, straight nose, and an expression that suggested he was accustomed to getting his way. One of the porch sitters gestured toward the schoolhouse, and the man turned, his gaze finding her window. Olivia stepped back hastily, but not before their eyes met across the distance. Even from afar, the intensity of his stare sent an unexpected shiver down her spine. That evening, as Olivia prepared a simple meal from the provisions Martha had supplied, a knock at her door startled her. She opened it to find a young girl of about 12 standing on her step, clutching a covered basket. "Miss Baker, Ma sent these over for your supper." The girl thrust the basket forward. "I'm Sally Jenkins. I'll be in your class." "Thank you, Sally. That's very kind of your mother." Olivia accepted the basket, which contained freshly baked bread and a jar of preserves. "Would you like to come in?" The girl shook her head, eyeing Olivia with undisguised curiosity. "Ma says I shouldn't bother you before school starts." She hesitated. "Is it true you come from a real city?" "Whispering Creek is hardly a city," Olivia laughed, "but it's larger than Pine Ridge." "Why'd you come here then?" Sally asked bluntly. "Nobody comes to Pine Ridge unless they have to." The question caught Olivia off guard. "I wanted a change," she said finally. "Sometimes a fresh start is what a person needs." Sally nodded solemnly. "That's what Mr. McAllister says too. He came here after the war and started with nothing." Her eyes widened suddenly. "Oh, I should go. Pa will be waiting for me." Before Olivia could respond, the girl darted away, leaving her to wonder about the mysterious Mr. McAllister, who seemed to cast such a long shadow over Pine Ridge. The next few days passed in a whirlwind of preparation. Olivia cleaned the schoolhouse thoroughly, arranged books and supplies, and prepared lessons for her diverse group of students. Several families came to introduce themselves and their children, some welcoming, others reserved. By Sunday evening, Olivia felt as ready as she could be for her first day of teaching. She was reviewing her lesson plans one final time when another knock sounded at her door. This time, her visitor was Martha Holbrook, accompanied by a stern-faced man in his 50s. "Miss Baker, this is Reverend Porter," Martha introduced him. "He'd like a word before school begins tomorrow." The Reverend barely waited for Olivia's invitation before stepping inside, his critical gaze sweeping over her humble quarters. "Miss Baker, I trust you understand the moral responsibility that comes with molding young minds," he began without preamble. "Our children must be taught not only reading and arithmetic but proper values and discipline." "Of course, Reverend," Olivia agreed cautiously. "Education encompasses character as well as knowledge, indeed." He fixed her with a penetrating stare. "I must be frank, Miss Baker. Some members of our community have expressed concern about your suitability as a role model for impressionable young ladies." Olivia felt her cheeks flush with anger and humiliation. Even here, where no one knew her past, her appearance was being used to judge her character. "My qualifications as a teacher are sound," she replied evenly, "and I believe my character will speak for itself through my actions." "Let us hope so." The Reverend turned to leave, adding over his shoulder, "Remember, Miss Baker, self-discipline in all things is the mark of true character." After he departed, Martha lingered, embarrassment evident in her expression. "I apologize for that. The Reverend means well, but he can be rigid in his thinking." "It's not an unfamiliar attitude," Olivia said quietly. Martha sighed. "There's something else you should know. Wade McAllister has pulled his niece from school, says she can learn what she needs at home." "McAllister again," Olivia murmured. "He seems to have significant influence here." "That's putting it mildly," Martha snorted. "Wade McAllister owns the largest ranch in the territory. Half the men in Pine Ridge work for him and the other half depend on his business. When he speaks, people listen. And he opposes the school." "Not exactly. He helped build it, in fact, but he's particular about who teaches his niece." Martha's expression softened. "Don't take it personally, dear. Wade's been raising Rebecca since his sister died 3 years ago. He's protective." After Martha left, Olivia sat on her narrow bed, troubled by the day's encounters. It seemed she would have to prove herself all over again in Pine Ridge, fighting prejudices both old and new. Monday morning dawned clear and bright. Olivia dressed carefully in her best teaching dress, navy blue with white collar and cuffs, and arranged her hair in a neat bun. At 7:30, she rang the school bell, its clear tone carrying across the settlement. Children began arriving shortly after, some eager, others reluctant, all curious about their new teacher. By 8 o'clock, 11 students were seated on the benches, ranging from tiny Emma Wilson, barely 6, to lanky 14-year-old James Holbrook, Martha's grandson. "Good morning, children," Olivia began, fighting back her nervousness. "I'm Miss Baker, and I'm very pleased to meet all of you." The morning progressed better than she had dared hope. After initial assessments to determine each child's level, Olivia divided them into groups and set them to appropriate tasks. By noon, when she rang the bell for lunch break, she felt cautiously optimistic. As the children scattered to eat their packed lunches in the schoolyard, Olivia noticed a rider approaching the same imposing figure she had glimpsed her first day in Pine Ridge. This time, there was no mistaking his destination. He was heading straight for the schoolhouse. Olivia stepped onto the porch, shading her eyes against the sun. The rider drew rein before her, and she found herself looking up at the most formidable man she had ever encountered. Wade McAllister was perhaps 35, with the weathered complexion of someone who lived outdoors. His hair was dark brown with sun-bleached streaks, and his eyes were a startling blue against his tanned skin. He regarded her with an intensity that made her acutely aware of every imperfection in her appearance. "Miss Baker," he said, his voice deep and slightly rough. "I understand you've taken charge of our school. Mr. McAllister, she replied, lifting her chin. Yes, I began teaching today. He swung down from his horse with the same fluid grace she had noticed before, though up close she could see he moved with a slight stiffness that suggested old injuries. I'll be direct, Miss Baker. My niece Rebecca should be among your students, but I've chosen to keep her home for now. So I've been told, Olivia said coolly. May I ask why? Something flickered in his eyes, surprise, perhaps, that she would question him. Rebecca's education is my responsibility. I need to be certain she's receiving proper instruction. And you've determined I can't provide that without seeing me teach, a muscle twitched in his jaw. I prefer to make informed decisions. Then I invite you to observe my classroom, Mr. McAllister, Olivia offered, surprising herself with her boldness. See for yourself what your niece would learn here. For a moment, he simply stared at her, and Olivia fought the urge to fidget under his scrutiny. Finally, he gave a curt nod. I'll do that, tomorrow morning. Without waiting for her response, he remounted his horse and rode away, leaving Olivia to wonder if she had just made a powerful ally or an equally powerful enemy. The next morning, Wade McAllister arrived just as Olivia was calling the children to order. He took a seat at the back of the room, his large frame looking absurdly out of place on the small bench. The children kept stealing glances at him, clearly unsettled by his presence. Determined not to be intimidated, Olivia proceeded with her lessons as planned. She led the younger children through their letters while the older group worked on mathematics problems. After recess, she conducted a history lesson, engaging the students with vivid descriptions of the first European explorations of America. Throughout the morning, she was acutely aware of McAllister's watchful presence, but she refused to let it affect her teaching. When noon came, she dismissed the children for lunch and turned to face her observer. Well, Mr. McAllister, do you have questions about my methods? He rose from his uncomfortable perch, stretching slightly. You handle them well, he conceded. Better than I expected. I'm qualified to teach despite what some might think, Olivia said, unable to keep a defensive note from her voice. McAllister studied her for a long moment. It's not your qualifications I questioned, Miss Baker. It's your staying power. Pine Ridge isn't an easy place to live. I'm stronger than I look, she replied, echoing the words she had spoken to Mr. Patterson what seemed like a lifetime ago. Something that might have been respect flickered in his eyes. We'll see. He moved toward the door, then paused. Rebecca will join your class on Monday. I expect weekly reports on her progress. Before Olivia could respond, he was gone, leaving her with the unexpected satisfaction of a small victory. The remainder of the week passed without further disruption. Olivia gradually settled into a routine, gaining confidence in her teaching and beginning to forge connections with her students. Several parents expressed appreciation for her methods, and even Reverend Porter grudgingly acknowledged that her classroom was well-ordered. When Monday arrived, Olivia was prepared for Rebecca McAllister's entrance. What she wasn't prepared for was the sight of Wade McAllister himself escorting a small, solemn-faced girl into the schoolhouse just before the bell rang. Miss Baker, he greeted her with a nod. This is my niece, Rebecca. The child was about 8, with the same striking blue eyes as her uncle and long dark braids tied with blue ribbons. She regarded Olivia warily, clutching a slate and primer to her chest. Welcome, Rebecca, Olivia said warmly, kneeling to the child's level despite the tightness of her corset. I'm very happy to have you join us. Rebecca glanced up at her uncle, who gave her an encouraging nod. Thank you, madam, she whispered. Rebecca has been schooled at home until now, McAllister explained. Her mother taught her before she passed. The gentleness with which he spoke of his sister surprised Olivia. There was clearly more to Wade McAllister than the intimidating figure he presented to the world. I'll make sure she feels comfortable, Olivia assured him. Rebecca, would you like to sit with Emma? She's just about your age. As the girl hesitantly took her place, McAllister lingered. I'll return at 3 to collect her, he said, his tone making it clear this was not negotiable. Throughout the day, Olivia kept a special eye on Rebecca. The girl was quiet but attentive and clearly well prepared academically. During lunch, Olivia noticed she sat alone, carefully unpacking an elaborate meal that put the other children's simple fare to shame. "Your uncle packed you quite a feast," Olivia remarked, sitting beside her. Rebecca shook her head. "Mrs. Gunderson packs my lunch. She's our housekeeper. Uncle Wade can't cook much except trail food." "I see, and do you live far from town?" "At the main ranch house. It's 5 miles west." Pride crept into the child's voice. "We have the biggest house in the county. Uncle Wade had it built special when I came to live with him." "That was very thoughtful of him," Olivia said, intrigued by this glimpse into McAllister's private life. Rebecca nodded solemnly. "Uncle Wade says a lady needs proper surroundings." She looked at Olivia curiously. "Don't you get lonely living at the school all by yourself?" The innocent question caught Olivia off guard. "Sometimes," she admitted, "but I have my books, and now I have all of you students to keep me company during the day." Rebecca seemed to consider this. "Maybe you could visit us sometime. We have lots of books too." "Uncle Wade reads to me every night before bed." The image of the stern rancher reading bedtime stories was so unexpected that Olivia nearly laughed. "That's very kind of him," was all she said. When 3 o'clock came, Wade McAllister was waiting on horseback outside the schoolhouse. As the other children dispersed, Rebecca ran to him, chattering excitedly about her day. Olivia watched from the doorway, struck by the transformation in both of them. The reserved child suddenly animated, the forbidding man smiling down with genuine warmth. McAllister lifted Rebecca easily onto the saddle in front of him. As they prepared to depart, he caught Olivia's eye and touched the brim of his hat in acknowledgement. It wasn't exactly a friendly gesture, but it wasn't hostile either. Over the next few weeks, a pattern emerged. McAllister would deliver Rebecca to school each morning with minimal conversation, then return precisely at 3. Occasionally, he would question Olivia about a particular lesson or assignment, but he never stayed long. Rebecca, meanwhile, blossomed in the classroom. Though still quiet among her peers, she proved to be an eager learner with a quick mind. She took particular interest in Olivia's geography lessons, fascinated by descriptions of places beyond Colorado. "Uncle Wade has been to California and Texas, and even New York City," she informed Olivia proudly one day. "He says maybe we'll go to San Francisco when I'm older." "Your uncle has traveled extensively," Olivia remarked, her curiosity about McAllister growing despite her attempts to remain professionally detached. "Before he got the ranch," Rebecca nodded. "He was a scout in the war, and then he guided wagon trains. That's how he found this valley and decided to stay." This new information added another dimension to Olivia's mental image of Wade McAllister. Not just a wealthy rancher, but a man who had seen the wider world before choosing this remote corner of it. As October progressed, bringing crisp mornings and golden aspen trees to the surrounding hillsides, Olivia found herself settling into life in Pine Ridge. The initial wariness with which some townspeople had regarded her was gradually giving way to acceptance, if not yet full welcome. Martha Holbrook proved to be a steadfast ally, frequently inviting Olivia for Sunday dinner and introducing her to the few social activities the settlement offered. Through Martha, Olivia learned more about the community's history and the complex web of relationships that bound its inhabitants together. Pine Ridge wasn't much more than a trading post until Wade McAllister established his ranch after the war, Martha explained one evening as they sat on her porch watching the sunset. "He had a vision for this valley that others couldn't see. He seems very determined," Olivia observed carefully. Martha chuckled. "That's one way to put it. Wade knows what he wants and doesn't waste time with niceties. Rubs some folks the wrong way, but there's not a more honest man in Colorado." She gave Olivia a sidelong glance. "He's taken an interest in your teaching, I hear." Olivia felt her cheeks warm, only for Rebecca's sake. Perhaps." Martha rocked gently in her chair. "Though I've noticed he's finding reasons to linger at the schoolhouse lately." It was true, Olivia realized. In recent days, McAllister had begun arriving early to collect Rebecca, often pausing to inspect a map or book while waiting. Just yesterday, he had spent nearly 20 minutes discussing Rebecca's progress in mathematics, standing close enough that Olivia could detect the faint sense of leather and pine that clung to him. Mr. McAllister is naturally concerned about his niece's education, Olivia insisted, as much to herself as to Martha. Of course, Martha agreed, a knowing smile playing about her lips. The following Monday brought an unexpected challenge. As Olivia was dismissing the children for lunch, she noticed dark clouds gathering over the western mountains, not the usual afternoon thunderheads, but a dense, threatening mass that promised significant weather. By 1 o'clock, the wind had risen sharply, driving dust and leaves before it. Several parents arrived early to collect their children, citing the approaching storm. By 2:30, only Rebecca and the Holbrook children remained. James, Olivia addressed Martha's grandson, please take your sisters home now. Tell your grandmother I've closed early due to the weather. As the Holbrook children departed, Olivia faced a dilemma. Rebecca couldn't walk 5 miles to the McAllister ranch in the brewing storm, but Wade wouldn't arrive for another half hour, possibly longer if he was delayed by ranch business. Rebecca, we'll wait a bit for your uncle, she decided. Meanwhile, let's bring in more firewood in case the temperature drops. Together, they stacked logs beside the stove, watching through the windows as the sky darkened ominously. Rain began to fall, fat drops that quickly became a steady downpour. By 3 o'clock, the dirt street had transformed into a river of mud, and there was no sign of Wade McAllister. He'll come, Rebecca said confidently, though Olivia noticed her glancing anxiously at the window. Uncle Wade always comes. At 3:30, with the storm intensifying, Olivia made a decision. We'll wait here together, Rebecca. I'm sure your uncle is just delayed by the weather. The girl nodded bravely, but Olivia could see fear beginning to creep into her eyes. Seeking to distract her, Olivia suggested they prepare a warm drink. I have cocoa powder, she offered. A special treat for a stormy afternoon. The simple activity helped calm Rebecca's nerves, and soon they were sitting by the stove with steaming mugs, listening to the rain lash against the windows. Tell me about your favorite books, Olivia suggested, and Rebecca launched into an enthusiastic description of the stories her uncle read to her. As the clock struck 4, the door burst open, admitting a gust of wind and rain along with Wade McAllister. He was drenched, his duster dripping onto the plank floor, his face a mask of concern that melted into relief at the sight of Rebecca safe by the fire. Uncle Wade, the child flew into his arms, heedless of his wet clothes. There's my girl, he murmured, holding her close before setting her down to examine her. You're all right, Miss Baker made cocoa, Rebecca reported. We were waiting for you. McAllister turned to Olivia, and she was struck by the raw emotion in his expression, relief mingled with something deeper, more vulnerable than she had ever seen in him. Thank you for keeping her safe, he said simply. Of course. Olivia hesitated, then added, the storm is still fierce. Perhaps you should both wait until it eases. McAllister glanced outside at the sheeting rain and nodded reluctantly. That would be wise. I left my horse at the livery when I saw how bad it was getting. An awkward silence fell as he removed his duster and hung it near the stove to dry. Without the bulky coat, Olivia was acutely aware of his powerful build, the way his damp shirt clung to broad shoulders. Would you like some cocoa, Mr. McAllister? She offered, desperate to break the tension. A hint of a smile touched his lips. I wouldn't say no to something warm. As Olivia busied herself preparing another mug, Rebecca chattered about her day, seemingly oblivious to the strange atmosphere between the adults. McAllister listened attentively, his deep voice occasionally rumbling a question or comment. When Olivia handed him the steaming cocoa, their fingers brushed briefly, sending an unexpected jolt through her. She withdrew quickly, flustered by her reaction. My thanks, Miss Baker, he said, his eyes holding hers for a moment longer than necessary. It's been a while since anyone offered me comfort in a storm. The simple statement, delivered in that rough, edged voice, stirred something in Olivia that she had thought long buried, a yearning for connection that went beyond the polite interactions of her daily life. Before she could respond, Rebecca piped up. Uncle Wade got caught in a blizzard once when he was scouting. He had to shelter in a cave with his horse for 3 days. Is that so? Olivia seized the opportunity to return to safer ground. That sounds like quite an adventure, Mr. McAllister. Thus prompted, McAllister began sharing stories of his travels, revealing a natural gift for narrative that kept both Olivia and Rebecca enthralled. As the storm raged outside, the small schoolroom became a cocoon of warmth and unexpected intimacy. An hour passed, then another. When the rain finally began to slacken, Olivia felt an irrational disappointment. McAllister rose and peered out the window at the darkening sky. "We should go while there's a break in the weather," he decided. "It'll be full dark soon." As he helped Rebecca into her coat, he turned to Olivia. "Miss Baker, Olivia." It was the first time he had used her given name, and it sounded strangely right in his deep voice. "Would you join us for dinner on Saturday, as thanks for today?" The invitation was so unexpected that Olivia momentarily lost the power of speech. Before she could recover, Rebecca clapped her hands in delight. "Oh, please say yes. Mrs. Gunderson makes the best apple pie, and I can show you my books, just like I promised." Caught between the child's enthusiasm and McAllister's intent gaze, Olivia found herself nodding. "I would be delighted." "Thank you." A smile transformed McAllister's face, softening the hard lines and bringing a warmth to his eyes that made Olivia's heart beat faster. "Saturday at 6, then. I'll send a wagon for you." After they left, Olivia sank into her chair, wondering what had just happened. Had Wade McAllister, the formidable, intimidating force of Pine Ridge, truly invited her to dinner? And more puzzling still, why did the prospect fill her with such nervous anticipation? The days leading up to Saturday seemed to crawl by. Olivia found herself distracted during lessons, her thoughts repeatedly straying to Wade McAllister and the unexpected glimpses of the man behind the stern exterior. When Saturday finally arrived, Olivia spent an uncharacteristic amount of time preparing for the evening. She washed her hair and arranged it in a softer style than her usual severe bun. After much deliberation, she chose her best dress, a deep green wool that her mother had always said brought out the amber flecks in her brown eyes. At precisely 5:30, a wagon arrived, driven by a weathered older man who introduced himself as Hank, the McAllister ranch foreman. The journey to the ranch took them along a well-maintained road that wound through stands of aspen and pine, before emerging into a sweeping valley ringed by mountains. The McAllister ranch house stood on a gentle rise overlooking the valley, a substantial two-story structure of hewn logs with a wide porch and many windows. As the wagon approached, Olivia saw Rebecca waiting on the porch, bouncing with excitement. "Miss Baker, you came." The child rushed down the steps as Hank helped Olivia from the wagon. "Of course I came," Olivia laughed, steadying herself on the uneven ground. "I promised, didn't I?" Rebecca seized her hand and tugged her toward the house. "Uncle Wade is inside. He told Mrs. Gunderson to make all the best dishes." The interior of the ranch house surprised Olivia. Rather than the Spartan bachelor quarters she had expected, she found a well-appointed home with comfortable furniture, colorful rugs, and shelves lined with books. The air was rich with the aromas of roasting meat and baking bread. Wade McAllister emerged from what appeared to be a study, and Olivia's breath caught at the sight of him. Dressed in clean dark trousers and a crisp white shirt, his hair neatly combed, he looked less like a hardened rancher and more like the successful businessman he evidently was. "Miss Baker," he greeted her, crossing the room to take her hand. "Welcome to our home." His touch was warm and firm, lingering just long enough to send another of those disconcerting jolts through her. Olivia withdrew her hand as gracefully as she could, conscious of a flush rising to her cheeks. "Thank you for inviting me, Mr. McAllister. You have a lovely home." "Wade, please," he corrected her, "at least when we're not at the schoolhouse." "Then you must call me Olivia," she replied, surprising herself with her boldness. A pleased smile curved his mouth. "Olivia," he repeated, as if testing the feel of it. "Rebecca has been counting the hours until your arrival. I believe she has an entire tour planned." True to his word, Rebecca immediately launched into a guided exploration of the house, proudly showing Olivia her bedroom with its canopied bed and collection of dolls, the formal dining room with its polished table, and finally, the library that occupied much of the ground floor's rear section. Uncle Wade had all these shelves built special, Rebecca explained, gesturing to the floor-to-ceiling bookcases that lined 3 walls. He says books are the best investment a person can make. Olivia ran her fingers along the leather-bound spines, impressed by the breadth of the collection. History, literature, science, even poetry. It was a library that would be notable even in Denver or Boston. "You're a man of unexpected depths, Wade," she remarked as he joined them in the library. Something flickered in his eyes, pleasure at her recognition, perhaps. "A man who stops learning might as well stop breathing," he said simply. Before she could respond, a stout woman in an apron appeared at the door. "Dinner is served, Mr. McAllister." The meal that followed was the finest Olivia had eaten since leaving Denver. Mrs. Gunderson had prepared roast beef with all the trimmings, followed by the promised apple pie. Throughout dinner, Rebecca chattered happily, while Wade guided the conversation with surprising skill, drawing Olivia out about her background and experiences. "You mentioned you taught in Denver before coming to Pine Ridge," he prompted as Mrs. Gunderson served coffee. Olivia hesitated, uncertain how much to reveal. "Briefly, yes, at a private girls' academy, but I found I preferred a more authentic environment." Wade's penetrating gaze suggested he sensed there was more to the story, but he didn't press. Instead, he asked about her family, and Olivia found herself describing her widowed mother and the small farm where she had grown up outside Whispering Creek. "And what brought you to teaching?" he inquired. "It's not an easy profession." "I've always loved learning," Olivia replied truthfully, "and sharing knowledge with others seemed the natural extension of that love." Wade nodded, a smile touching his lips. "I've seen that passion when you're with the children. It's admirable." The simple compliment warmed Olivia more than it should have. After dinner, Rebecca reluctantly went upstairs with Mrs. Gunderson for her bath, leaving Olivia and Wade alone in the library with their coffee. An awkward silence fell between them, broken only by the crackling of the fire in the hearth. Olivia found herself studying Wade surreptitiously, noting the play of firelight on his strong features and the thoughtful expression in his blue eyes as he gazed into the flames. "Why did you really come to Pine Ridge, Olivia?" he asked suddenly, turning those intense eyes on her. The truth this time. The direct question caught her off guard. For a moment, she considered offering another evasion, but something in his expression and openness, a genuine desire to understand, made her choose honesty instead. "I needed to leave Whispering Creek," she admitted quietly. "I had become an object of pity and gossip, because—" He prompted gently when she hesitated. Olivia took a deep breath. "Because 3 men had courted and then rejected me, the last breaking our engagement just before the wedding. The consensus was that I was too plump to attract a husband." The words burned her throat like bile. "Too fat to marry," they said. Wade's expression darkened with anger. "Fools," he said flatly, startled by his vehemence. Olivia stared at him. "I beg your pardon, those men. Fools, the lot of them." He set his coffee cup down with a decisive click. "A woman should be judged by her character, her intelligence, her heart, not by whether she fits some arbitrary standard of appearance." His defense, unexpected and fierce, touched something deep within Olivia. "That's a surprisingly progressive view." Wade rose and moved to stand before the fire, his broad shoulders silhouetted against the flames. "I've never much cared for society's rules about who's acceptable and who isn't." He turned to face her, his expression softening. "For what it's worth, Olivia, I find nothing lacking in you." Quite the contrary. The sincerity in his voice made her breath catch. Before she could formulate a response, he changed the subject, asking about her plans for the school's Christmas program. The moment passed, but something had shifted between them, a new understanding, a deeper connection than the polite distance they had maintained until now. When it came time for Olivia to leave, Wade insisted on driving her back to town himself, despite Hank's offer to handle the task. The night was clear and cold, stars scattered like diamonds across the velvet sky. Wrapped in a warm blanket Wade had provided, Olivia felt a contentment she hadn't experienced in longer than she could remember. "Thank you for a lovely evening," she said as they traveled through the silent forest. Rebecca is a wonderful child. You've done well with her. She makes it easy, Wade replied, his voice soft in the darkness. When my sister died, I wasn't sure I could be what Rebecca needed. I'm still not sure sometimes. You give her security, education, love, Olivia said. That's what any child needs most. Wade was silent for a moment, then said, having you as her teacher has been good for her. She talks about you constantly. He hesitated. I think she's been missing a woman's influence in her life. The implication hung in the air between them, unspoken but undeniable. When they reached the schoolhouse, Wade helped Olivia down from the wagon, his hands strong and steady at her waist. For a breathless moment, they stood close in the starlight, and Olivia thought he might kiss her. Instead, he stepped back, releasing her with visible reluctance. Good night, Olivia, he said, his voice husky. I hope you'll visit us again soon. I'd like that, she replied softly. As she watched him drive away, Olivia acknowledged the truth she had been avoiding for weeks. She was falling in love with Wade McAllister. And judging by the way he had looked at her tonight, the feeling might not be entirely one-sided. The weeks leading up to Christmas brought a flurry of activity to Pine Ridge. Olivia threw herself into preparations for the school's holiday program, helping the children rehearse carols and short recitations to perform for their parents. Rebecca, with her quick mind and natural poise, was cast as the narrator, a role she embraced with earnest dedication. Wade continued to bring Rebecca to school each morning, but now their interactions had a new warmth, a sense of shared secrets and growing affection. Occasionally, their hands would brush as he handed over Rebecca's lunch pail, or their eyes would meet in a look that spoke volumes without words. Olivia found herself invited to the McAllister Ranch with increasing frequency Sunday dinners, an afternoon of baking Christmas cookies with Rebecca, even a tree-trimming evening that ended with Wade reading A Christmas Carol aloud by the fire, his deep voice bringing Dickens' words vividly to life. With each visit, Olivia's feelings deepened, even as she cautioned herself against reading too much into Wade's attentions. Perhaps he was simply being kind to his niece's teacher, or seeking female companionship for Rebecca's sake. The school's Christmas program was scheduled for the last day before the holiday break. As Olivia arranged benches and decorated the schoolhouse on the evening before, she heard the door open behind her. Turning, she found Wade standing there, snowflakes melting on his broad shoulders. Wade. I wasn't expecting you. She climbed down from the chair where she had been hanging paper stars from the ceiling. Thought you might need an extra pair of hands, he said, removing his hat. Rebecca mentioned you were preparing the schoolhouse tonight. Touched by his thoughtfulness, Olivia smiled. I would appreciate the help. Those garlands need to be hung across the front, but they're too heavy for me to manage alone. Working together, they transformed the simple schoolroom into a festive space, with pine boughs, paper decorations, and candles in holders that would be lit for tomorrow's evening performance. As Wade lifted the heavy evergreen garlands into place, Olivia couldn't help but admire the strength evident in every movement, the competent way his large hands managed the delicate task. There, he said at last, stepping back to survey their work, fit for a Christmas celebration. It's perfect, Olivia agreed, standing beside him. The children will be thrilled. Wade turned to face her, his expression suddenly serious. Olivia, there's something I've been wanting to discuss with you. Her heart quickened. Yes. Before he could continue, the door burst open, admitting Reverend Porter with a gust of cold air. Miss Baker, the Reverend stopped short at the sight of Wade. McAllister, I didn't realize you were here. Wade's expression closed like a shutter. Reverend, he acknowledged coolly. An awkward silence fell as the two men regarded each other with barely concealed antipathy. Olivia looked between them, puzzled by the obvious tension. What can I help you with, Reverend? She asked, breaking the stalemate. Porter dragged his attention back to her. I came to discuss tomorrow's program. I trust the material is appropriate. The children will be singing carols and reciting Bible verses about the Nativity, Olivia assured him. I believe you'll find it entirely suitable. See that it is, Porter said stiffly. His gaze swept over the decorated room, lingering disapprovingly on the colorful paper stars. Remember, Miss Baker, Christmas is a solemn religious observance, not an occasion for frivolity. I believe it can be both, Wade interjected, his tone deceptively casual. Joy and reverence need not be mutually exclusive. Porter's thin lips compressed into a hard line. I wouldn't expect you to understand the proper observance of Christian holidays, McAllister, not with your history. Before Wade could respond, the Reverend turned on his heel and departed, leaving a chill in the air that had nothing to do with the open door. What was that about? Olivia asked, bewildered by the exchange. Wade's jaw worked as he stared at the closed door. Porter and I have a long-standing disagreement about many things, he sighed, the tension slowly leaving his shoulders. I apologize, I didn't mean to create an uncomfortable situation. You didn't, Olivia assured him, touching his arm lightly. The Reverend seems to find fault with everyone at some point. A reluctant smile tugged at Wade's mouth. That's charitable of you. He glanced at the clock on the wall. It's getting late. I should escort you home. What was it you wanted to discuss? Olivia asked, remembering his interrupted statement. Wade hesitated, then shook his head. It can wait until after the Christmas program. This isn't the right time. Though curious, Olivia didn't press. Instead, she gathered her cloak and allowed Wade to walk her the short distance to her quarters behind the schoolhouse. At her door, he paused, looking down at her with an expression that made her heart flutter. Olivia, he began, then stopped, seeming to struggle with his words. Yes. Instead of speaking, he reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away and brushed a strand of hair from her cheek. His fingers lingered, warm against her skin, and Olivia found herself leaning into his touch without conscious thought. The moment stretched between them, taut with possibility. Then Wade stepped back, his hand falling to his side. Good night, Olivia, he said softly. Until tomorrow. As she watched him disappear into the snowy night, Olivia pressed her fingers to her cheek, still feeling the ghost of his touch. Whatever Wade had wanted to say, she sensed it would change everything between them. The Christmas program exceeded all expectations. Parents and townspeople packed the schoolhouse, filling every bench and standing along the walls to watch the children perform. Even Reverend Porter seemed grudgingly impressed by the students' earnest recitations and sweet singing. Rebecca, in her role as narrator, stood tall and spoke clearly, her face glowing with pride as she caught her uncle's eye in the audience. Wade sat in the front row, his expression one of undisguised admiration for both his niece and the teacher who had prepared her so well. After the final carol, as parents congratulated their children and enjoyed the simple refreshments Olivia had prepared, Wade made his way through the crowd to her side. You've done something remarkable here, he said, his voice low for her ears alone. Look at them, the whole community together, celebrating. That's your doing, Olivia. She flushed with pleasure at his praise. The children did all the work, I just guided them. Don't diminish your achievement, Wade chided gently. You've brought something to Pine Ridge that was missing before you came. Before Olivia could respond, Martha Holbrook approached, her eyes twinkling with mischief. Wade McAllister, are you monopolizing our teacher? There are parents waiting to speak with her, you know. Wade inclined his head with a smile. My apologies, Martha. I'll return Miss Baker to her duties. He turned back to Olivia. May I call on you tomorrow afternoon? There's something I'd like to show you. Intrigued, Olivia nodded. Of course. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of congratulations and farewells as families gradually departed, taking tired but happy children home through the snowy night. By the time the last guest had gone, Olivia was exhausted but exhilarated by the program's success. As she cleared away cups and plates, she found herself humming softly, her thoughts drifting to Wade and their planned meeting tomorrow. What did he want to show her? And more importantly, what had he been trying to tell her last night before the Reverend interrupted? The next day dawned clear and cold, the world transformed by a fresh blanket of snow that sparkled in the winter sunlight. Olivia spent the morning cleaning the schoolhouse and organizing materials for the lessons that would resume after the new year. By noon, anticipation had her checking the clock every few minutes. Wade arrived precisely at 2, driving a sleigh instead of the usual wagon. I thought we might take advantage of the snow, he explained as he helped Olivia up beside him. There's something special about a sleigh ride on a winter afternoon. Tucked beneath warm furs, with the sleigh bells jingling merrily as they glided over the snow, Olivia felt as though she had stepped into a fairy tale. Wade guided the horses away from town, following a trail that wound through pine forests and across open meadows glistening white in the afternoon sun. "Where are we going?" Olivia asked, curious about their destination. "There's a place on my land I want to show you," Wade replied, a hint of anticipation in his voice. "It's best seen in winter." After about 20 minutes, they crested a hill, and Wade drew the horses to a halt. Before them stretched a vista of breathtaking beauty, a valley enclosed by mountains, with a frozen lake at its center reflecting the blue sky and surrounding pines like a perfect mirror. "Oh," Olivia breathed, momentarily speechless at the sight. "It's magnificent." "This is the heart of my land," Wade said quietly. "The first time I saw this valley, I knew I'd found home." He turned to look at her, his blue eyes intense. "I wanted you to see it." The significance of his words wasn't lost on Olivia. This wasn't simply a scenic view he was sharing, but something deeply personal, a piece of himself that few were privileged to see. "Thank you for bringing me here," she said softly. Wade secured the reins and turned fully toward her on the seat. "Olivia, what I've been trying to tell you, what keeps getting interrupted, is that these past months with you have been the happiest I've known in years." Her heart began to race. "Wade, please, let me finish before I lose my nerve," he said with a wry smile. "I know we haven't known each other long by conventional standards. I know there are those in town who would disapprove for various reasons, but I've lived enough to recognize what matters." He took her gloved hand in his. "You matter, Olivia, to me and to Rebecca, more than I can properly express." Tears pricked at Olivia's eyes, both from the cold and from the emotion his words evoked. "I feel the same," she admitted. "These months in Pine Ridge knowing you and Rebecca have healed something in me I thought was broken forever." Wade's expression softened, and he reached up to cup her cheek gently. "In Whispering Creek, they called you too fat to marry," he said, his voice rough with feeling. "Fools, every one of them, because I look at you and see a woman who is exactly the right size for my arms." With that, he drew her close, his arms encircling her in a warm embrace that felt like coming home. When his lips met hers, Olivia felt the last of her doubts melt away like snow in sunshine. This was right. This was where she belonged. The kiss deepened, tender yet passionate, expressing everything they had left unspoken. When they finally parted, Wade rested his forehead against hers, his breath forming small clouds in the cold air between them. "I love you, Olivia Baker," he said simply. "Will you consider becoming my wife?" "Rebecca's mother, mistress of this land that I love almost as much as I love you," joy bubbled up within Olivia, bright and effervescent as champagne. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes to all of it." Wade's smile was like sunrise breaking over the mountains. He kissed her again, this time with a jubilant intensity that left her breathless. When they parted, he kept her close within the circle of his arm as they gazed out over the valley that would be their home. "There will be challenges," he warned, ever practical even in this moment of happiness. "Porter and his ilk won't approve. Some will say it's too sudden." "Let them talk," Olivia said with newfound confidence. "We know what's in our hearts." They remained on the hilltop until the winter sun began its early descent, painting the snow-covered landscape in shades of gold and rose. As they drove back toward town, plans and dreams flowed between them: a spring wedding, improvements to the schoolhouse, summers spent exploring the mountains with Rebecca. When they reached Pine Ridge, Wade drove directly to the McAllister ranch rather than returning Olivia to the schoolhouse. "Rebecca will want to hear our news," he explained. "She's been hoping for this, you know. She adores you." The child's reaction to their announcement exceeded even their expectations. Rebecca flung herself into Olivia's arms with a cry of delight, then danced around the room singing, "I'm getting a mother. I'm getting a mother." That evening, the three of them sat before the fire in the ranch house library, a family already in all but name. As Rebecca dozed against Wade's shoulder, he reached across to take Olivia's hand. "Happy?" he asked softly. Olivia squeezed his fingers, her heart full to bursting. happier than I ever thought possible. Later, as Wade drove her back to town, propriety still had to be observed. At least, until their wedding, Olivia marveled at the twists of fate that had brought her to this moment. The rejection that had seemed like the end of her hopes had actually been the beginning of her journey to true happiness. "What are you thinking?" Wade asked, noticing her pensive expression. Olivia smiled up at him, secure in his love and her own worth. "I'm thinking that sometimes life takes us exactly where we need to go, even when it seems to be taking us away from everything we wanted." Wade nodded, understanding in his eyes. "I believe that too. How else would I explain finding you exactly when I didn't know I was looking, under a sky blazing with stars?" Their lips met once more in a promise that would last a lifetime. For Olivia Baker, once deemed too fat to marry, had found not just a husband, but a man who saw her true beauty and cherished her exactly as she was. Spring came early to Pine Ridge that year, as if nature itself celebrated the union about to take place. Meadows burst into bloom with wildflowers, aspens unfurled delicate green leaves, and birds returned to fill the air with joyous song. Preparations for the wedding occupied much of Olivia's time outside school hours. Martha Holbrook had taken charge of many details, organizing the women of Pine Ridge to create a celebration worthy of the occasion. Despite Reverend Porter's continued disapproval, he had refused to perform the ceremony, citing its hasty nature. Most of the community had embraced the match between their schoolteacher and the Valley's most prominent citizen. "Let Reverend Wilson from Junction Creek handle the ceremony," Martha declared when Porter declined. "He's a more cheerful soul anyway, and less likely to turn a wedding into a sermon on temperance and moral decay." Wade, meanwhile, had thrown himself into preparing their home. Though he had insisted Olivia needed to change nothing about the ranch house, she had expressed a desire for a larger kitchen and a dedicated sewing room. Construction began immediately, with Wade often working alongside his men to ensure everything would be ready by the wedding day. Rebecca divided her time between school and wedding preparations with equal enthusiasm. She had appointed herself official taste tester for the wedding cake Mrs. Gunderson was planning, and had spent hours helping Olivia select fabric for her wedding dress. The dress itself was a source of both joy and anxiety for Olivia. Having always struggled to find ready-made garments that fit her fuller figure properly, she had decided to create her own wedding gown. With Martha's help, she designed a dress of ivory silk with delicate lace trim that accentuated her curves rather than attempting to disguise them. "You'll be the most beautiful bride Pine Ridge has ever seen," Martha declared as they finished the final fitting 2 days before the wedding. "Wade McAllister won't be able to take his eyes off you." Olivia blushed, still somewhat uncomfortable with such direct praise of her appearance. "It's a lovely dress," she agreed, smoothing the silk over her hips. "I never thought I'd wear something so fine." Martha's expression softened as she adjusted the lace at Olivia's neckline. "You know, when you first came to Pine Ridge, I worried you wouldn't stay. So many teachers had left before you couldn't handle the isolation or the hardships." She stepped back to survey her work. "But I see now you were meant to be here. This is where you belong." Tears pricked at Olivia's eyes. "Thank you, Martha, for everything." The older woman waved away her gratitude. "Pshaw, I've done nothing but what any friend would do." She busied herself packing away sewing notions. "Now about the wedding night, Martha," Olivia protested, her cheeks flaming. Martha chuckled. "Don't tell me a woman of 22 needs instruction in that department." "No, but I don't need discussion of it either," Olivia replied primly, though she couldn't help smiling at Martha's forthright manner. The wedding day dawned clear and warm, a perfect late April morning. As tradition dictated, Wade had spent the night in town while Olivia remained at the ranch house, now officially her home as well. Rebecca had insisted on sleeping in Olivia's room, too excited to be separated from her soon-to-be mother. "Do you think Uncle Wade is nervous?" the child asked as she helped Olivia arrange her hair. "He kept dropping things yesterday and saying words I'm not supposed to repeat." Olivia laughed, imagining the usually composed Wade flustered by pre-wedding jitters. "I think we're all a little nervous, sweetheart, but in a good way." The ceremony was scheduled for noon in the meadow beside the lake Wade had shown Olivia on that winter day when he proposed. Guests would arrive throughout the morning, with a feast to follow the exchange of vows. As the hour approached, Olivia stood before the mirror in her bedroom, barely recognizing the radiant woman who looked back at her. The ivory silk gown fit perfectly, highlighting rather than hiding her figure. Her honey-colored hair was arranged in soft waves, adorned with small white flowers that Rebecca had helped gather that morning. A knock at the door preceded Martha's entrance. The older woman stopped short at the sight of Olivia, her eyes widening in appreciation. "Well now," she said softly. "Aren't you a vision?" Behind her came Mrs. Gunderson, dabbing at her eyes with a handkerchief. "Oh, Miss Baker, I mean, almost Mrs. McAllister, you look like an angel." Olivia smiled at them both, too full of emotion for words. This day, this happiness had seemed impossible less than a year ago when she fled Whispering Creek heartbroken and humiliated. Yet here she stood, a bride beloved not for her appearance but for her heart, her mind, her very self. "It's time," Martha announced. "Your groom is waiting, and if the look on his face when he arrived is any indication, he's mighty impatient to see you." The journey to the lakeside meadow was like a dream. Seated in a flower-decked wagon driven by Hank, with Rebecca chattering excitedly beside her, Olivia felt a surreal blend of nervous anticipation and profound peace. This was right. This was meant to be. As they approached the meadow, Olivia could see the gathering of guests, nearly everyone from Pine Ridge and many from neighboring settlements. Colorful dresses and polished boots stood out against the green grass and wildflowers. At the far end, near the sparkling lake, stood a simple arch twined with early roses and spring greenery. And beneath it, waiting for her, was Wade. Even at a distance, the sight of him took her breath away. Tall and straight in a new black suit, his dark hair neatly trimmed, he stood with his hands clasped before him, his attention fixed on the approaching wagon. As it drew nearer, Olivia could see his expression transform wonder, joy, and love so clear on his face that tears sprang to her eyes. The wagon stopped at the edge of the gathered crowd. Hank helped Olivia down, and Rebecca immediately took her place at the front of the makeshift aisle that had been created between rows of seated guests. The girl would precede Olivia to the altar, carrying a basket of wildflowers. "Ready, little miss?" Hank asked with a wink. Rebecca nodded solemnly, suddenly aware of the importance of her role. As the violinist brought all the way from Junction Creek for the occasion began to play, she stepped forward with careful dignity, scattering flower petals as she went. Then it was Olivia's turn. With no father to give her away, she had chosen to walk alone, a symbol of the independence that had brought her to this place and this man. As she took her first step, the assembled guests rose to their feet. Faces smiled at her from both sides of the aisle, Martha beaming with pride, James Holbrook grinning broadly, even shy Sally Jenkins offering a little wave. But Olivia had eyes only for Wade. With each step toward him, the rest of the world seemed to fade until there was only this man, this moment, this promise they were about to make to each other. When she reached him at last, Wade extended his hands to take hers, his blue eyes shining with emotion. "You are so beautiful," he whispered, the words meant for her alone. Reverend Wilson, a jovial man with a shock of white hair, beamed at the couple before addressing the gathering. "Friends, we are here today to witness the union of two souls who have found in each other the perfect complement to their own hearts." The ceremony itself was simple but meaningful. Wade and Olivia had written their own vows, words that spoke of respect, partnership, and enduring love. When Wade promised to cherish her exactly as you are, for all that you are, for all of our days, Olivia's voice nearly failed her as she made her answering pledge. Rebecca played her part perfectly, presenting the rings at the appropriate moment with a solemnity that briefly gave way to an irrepressible grin when Wade winked at her. As Olivia's gold band was slipped onto her finger, she felt the weight of it not as a restriction but as an anchor, a tangible symbol of the home and family she had found. "By the authority vested in me," Reverend Wilson proclaimed, "I now pronounce you husband and wife." He smiled broadly at Wade. "You may kiss your bride." Wade needed no further invitation. Drawing Olivia into his arms, he kissed her with a tenderness that belied the strength in his embrace. The gathered guests erupted in cheers and applause, with several of the ranch hands adding enthusiastic whoops for good measure. As they turned to face their friends and neighbors, now officially Mr. and Mrs. McAllister, Olivia felt Rebecca slip between them, taking each of their hands in hers. Together, the three of them walked back down the aisle as a family at last. The celebration that followed lasted well into the evening. Tables had been set up near the lake, laden with food prepared by Mrs. Gunderson and the women of Pine Ridge. A space was cleared for dancing, with the violinist joined by two local musicians to provide lively tunes that had everyone from children to elders taking to the impromptu dance floor. As the sun began to set, casting golden light across the lake, Wade drew Olivia away from the festivities to a quiet spot beneath a stand of aspens. "Happy, Mrs. McAllister?" he asked, his arms circling her waist. "Completely," she assured him, leaning into his embrace. "Though I'm still getting used to the name," Wade chuckled, the sound reverberating pleasantly against her cheek where it rested on his chest. "You have a lifetime to practice." He tilted her face up to his. "I still can't believe you're mine." "Believe it," Olivia whispered, rising on tiptoe to kiss him. "I'm not going anywhere." They remained in their private sanctuary until Rebecca found them, insisting they return for the cutting of the wedding cake. As they rejoined the celebration, Olivia was struck by the genuine warmth and acceptance radiating from the gathered community. These people, once strangers, now friends, had embraced her not despite, but because of who she was. Later, as twilight deepened into night and stars appeared above the lake, Wade and Olivia bid farewell to their guests. Rebecca would spend the night with Martha, giving the newlyweds privacy for their first evening as husband and wife. "Be good for Mrs. Holbrook," Olivia instructed, hugging the child tightly. "We'll see you tomorrow afternoon." "I know," Rebecca replied with the worldly wisdom of the young. "You and Uncle Wade need to be alone because you're married now." Wade coughed to cover a laugh while Olivia felt heat rise to her cheeks. "That's right, sweetheart. Being married is special." After Rebecca's departure, Wade and Olivia returned to the ranch house, now quiet after the day's festivities. As they entered, Wade suddenly swept Olivia into his arms, carrying her across the threshold despite her startled protests about her weight. "You're exactly right for my arms," he reminded her, setting her gently on her feet in the entry hall. "Perfect, in fact." In the soft glow of lamplight, Olivia looked up at her husband, the word still new and wondrous in her mind. This strong, complex man had seen beyond the surface to the woman beneath, offering not just love but understanding, respect, and a shared future. "I love you, Wade McAllister," she said simply. His answer was in his kiss, in the gentle reverence with which he led her upstairs to their bedroom, in every touch and whispered word that followed. That night, Olivia discovered the final healing of old wounds as Wade showed her how beautiful she truly was in his eyes. The years that followed brought challenges and joys in equal measure. The school in Pine Ridge flourished under Olivia's guidance, eventually expanding to a larger building that Wade helped design. Rebecca grew from a child into a thoughtful young woman, her quick mind and compassionate heart a source of pride to both her parents. 2 years after their wedding, Olivia gave birth to twins, a boy they named William, after Wade's father, and a girl called Margaret, for Olivia's mother. The McAllister family became known throughout the county for their hospitality, their commitment to education, and their unwavering support for those in need. Reverend Porter eventually left Pine Ridge for a parish in Denver, replaced by a younger minister who found common ground with Wade on many issues. The settlement grew into a proper town, with Wade serving several terms as mayor despite his initial reluctance to enter politics. Through it all, the foundation remained the same: the love between a man and woman who had found in each other everything they hadn't known they were seeking. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Wade surprised Olivia with a journey back to their special place by the lake. Though the valley had changed, the ranch had prospered, New buildings had risen. The view from that particular hilltop remained as breathtaking as it had been on that winter day when he proposed. 10 years, Olivia mused, leaning against her husband as they gazed out over their land. Sometimes it feels like yesterday, and sometimes it feels like we've always been together. Wade's arm tightened around her. At 45, he was still powerfully built, though silver now threaded his dark hair. Best 10 years of my life, he said simply. And I'm looking forward to at least 40 more. Olivia smiled up at him, her heart as full as it had been on their wedding day. Remember what those fools in Whispering Creek said, that I was too fat to marry? Wade's expression darkened momentarily. I remember. Still makes me want to knock some sense into them. Don't, Olivia laughed, squeezing his hand. If they hadn't been so cruel, I might never have left, might never have found my way to Pine Ridge. She turned in his arms to face him fully. Might never have found you. Wade's face softened as he gazed down at her. Then I suppose I owe them my gratitude, though they don't deserve it. He brushed a strand of honey-colored hair now with its own threads of silver from her cheek in a gesture that echoed their first tentative touches. You know what I think. What's that? I think you've always been exactly the right size, Wade said, his voice husky with emotion. The right size for teaching, for motherhood, for this community that loves you. He drew her closer, his arms encircling her as perfectly as they had a decade ago. And most of all, the right size for my arms where you belong, Olivia McAllister, now and always. As their lips met in a kiss that held all the passion of newlyweds and all the deeper connection of 10 years shared, Olivia knew with absolute certainty that she had found her true home not in a place, but in the heart of a man who saw her true worth and in the family they had built together. In Pine Ridge, Colorado, where the mountains touched the sky and wildflowers bloomed each spring, they would continue their story, the schoolteacher once deemed unmarriageable, and the rancher who had known from the start that she was perfectly, exactly right.